All right. Hello and welcome everyone to our webinar on recruiting email benchmarks and best practices. We've got quite a few people here today, and we're really excited about today's discussion. So just give me a few seconds as we will let everyone join in. In the meantime, just so I can make sure y'all can hear me, does someone want to just say hi or hello so I know that there's people here? Perfect. Thank you. You guys are so friendly and nice. Awesome. Cool. Well, let's go ahead and get started with some housekeeping items. So before we dive in, I just want to let everyone know that today's session is being recorded and it will be available on demand after this session. So if you have some folks who couldn't attend or if you have to hop out early, don't worry, the recording will be available afterward. And if you have any questions while I'm presenting, please feel free to submit them in the Q&A section. So if someone beats you to a question, you can actually upvote it, and that way I know what's top of mind for you all. And then we'll definitely leave some time at the end of this session to have some Q&A. And if I'm not able to get to it today, I'll be sure to follow up with you individually. And then lastly, I see a lot of you are here live and already in the attendee chat. Thank you so much. Feel free to just throw in any comments as I'm presenting. If you have any takeaways or insights, or just want to say hi, would love to just know what you all think as we go through the data and if you have any feedback on this presentation. All right, so I'll do a quick round of introductions. My name is Ani. I'm the head of product marketing here at GEM, and I've been at GEM now for almost 4 years, which is wild to say. I'll now turn it over to you. Thank you for everyone who said hi. But yeah, if you're tuning in, share your name, where you're from, and then a fun little icebreaker. Tell me what's your top New Year's resolution for 2025. I'll go first. I'll tell you right now, it's to spend less time on my phone. I'm sure many of you feel that way as well. But yeah, if any of you guys feel comfortable, tell me more about yourself and your New Year's resolution. Cool. So in the meantime, here is our agenda for today. So we'll start with just giving you a bird's eye view of the overall benchmarks, so like conversion rates. Then we'll go into like when are the best times to send your recruiting email outreach. After that, we'll talk about like what's a good subject line look like, which I know a lot of people would be interested in. And then the fourth topic will be about who should you be sending the email from? Is it a recruiter? Is it a hiring manager? And what's this data there? And then we'll wrap it up with putting it all together and just show you some real examples of some of the best recruiting emails that our customers have been using and kind of talk about why they're so powerful. And then as I promised, we will then go into a little bit of Q&A if there's any questions. Also, I saw someone said they want to spend less time on TikTok. I love that. That is definitely a top goal for myself as well, but who knows? All right, so let's start with just talking about the key overall metrics on conversion rates so that we can calibrate expectations. So on this page, you'll basically see a bird's eye view of open rates, reply rates, and interested rates. And compared to 2022, what we've seen is that this year's open rates have come down a touch, but the reply rates and the interested rates are actually noticeably better. And so what that tells us is that there are indeed eager job seekers who are receptive to recruiter outreach if a promising opportunity shows up. So really the takeaway here is that first email really needs to be compelling. And then one thing to note is that while about 23% of our sequences do see a reply, only 12% of them are what we would call an interested reply, meaning that they're actually interested in further continuing the conversation. So just note that about half the replies are generally going to be the thanks, but no thanks type. Cool. So let's talk about follow-ups and sequencing. So, for those of you who have been in recruiting for a while, this probably is not a surprise, but sending a follow-up after that first non-response is generally going to increase your response rates. So as you see on the data on this chart, a 4-stage sequence is going to receive twice as many replies and achieve a 68% higher interested rate compared to a one-off email. However, that engagement does start to flatten after stage 4. So after that 4th email, your email will likely be ignored and it can potentially come across as spammy if you're being too insistent. So you do want to be a little bit careful there. Cool. And then let's go ahead and talk about when is the best day and time to send this. And you might be curious about why this matters, but as we go into the next slide, the first thing to know is that timing is really, really important. 50% of the candidates that will open your email are going to do it within the first hour. So the longer it takes someone to notice your email, the less likely they are to even open it. And that's why we want to talk a little bit more about when are the best times to send so that you can strategically schedule your emails at the right time. Cool. So let's talk about the best day of the week. Turns out Tuesday is the best day with 66.5% open rates, followed by Wednesday. And then there's a little bit of variation Monday through Thursday, and Friday tends to see a small dip. One thing that's interesting here is that most people don't send emails on the weekend, which makes sense. But if you look at the data here, the open rates are actually a little bit higher than some other days. So it's worth experimenting with trying out an email on a weekend to see if you might have a better chance. You're competing against less people and your open rates are actually staying pretty good. So you might actually be able to get more interest there. And then throughout the week, when we talk about what time of day, 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. With around 67 to 68% open rates are pretty good, as well as 10 a.m. And then the open rates tend to stay steady throughout the working hours of 9 to 5, and then they drop off after 8 p.m. Probably makes sense, right? Early in the morning, before they go into work is a time they might be able to open it, or as they're closing out their day. I did just see a quick question about what is an open rate. Good question. So I'll just go through it back at a high level. So when you send an email, say you send it to 100 people, if 50 people open that email, that's the open rate, so 50%. Now, amongst that 50, if 25 people actually respond with some kind of response, that is a 25% reply rate. But then, like I mentioned earlier, some of those responses just might be like, hey, like thank you for sending this email, but we're not interested. So we want to parse that out as well. And so again, in the benchmarks, what you see is 12% of all emails you send will get an interested reply, which is the one that matters. And then Debbie, I also just saw a question about which time zone are you sending, or is this multiple time zones? Great question. So our data is across a huge data set of folks. And so what we do is we normalize the time zone. So when you look at these volumes, it's based on the time zone of that specific region that that customer is reaching out to that candidate, if that makes sense. Cool. And then let's see. I got another question about why is 10 a.m. the best? No, that's a good point. Thank you for sharing that. I'll have to look at the actual data, but the point here being that typically 8 a.m. is pretty good, and then slightly after 4 o'clock is usually the best. So thank you for calling that out. But typically from 9 to 5, the open rates are pretty steady. It's just that they tend to drop off in the wee early days of the morning or super late at night. Cool. Cool. So let's talk a little bit about subject lines. And I know a lot of questions are coming, so don't worry, we'll cover it through at the end. But I wanted to also talk about the subject lines here as well, because these are typically your first impression. And so this might be the hook that you need to get them to open the email. So on this page, you're going to see some of the top performing subject lines that our customers have sent. They've all received a 90% plus open rate. And so there's a few different examples here, but I'll just call out some of the key trends. So one is appealing to a candidate's values, asking questions, outlining next steps, sending event invitations and follow-ups, or even highlighting specific parts of the opportunity work really well. The overall takeaway here is you want to find subject lines that have the balance of relevant details, but also keep it concise. And so these are some of the examples, the words that we see in the top performing subject lines. So things like first name, company title. These are the tokens that you can auto-populate in Gem. But there's also a few other trends that we've noticed. So keeping it personalized, so using tokens around the words like you can make it feel more personal, being super clear right away about job title and company name, keeping it conversational, like saying words like hello or hi, and even tapping into a candidate's ambitions. So if you could say words like lead or leadership or build, they can appeal to that candidate's desire on taking the next big challenge in their careers. And I just see a message about going back to the subject line slide. I'll just, for the interest, like real quickly, show it up again. Again, these are just some of the examples of subject lines that we've seen that work really well. Obviously, we've scrubbed some of the personal information here, but as you can see, again, ways to just appeal to the value of what a candidate might be looking for, sometimes using a question, highlighting those opportunities. And then just so you all know, a recording will be available of this after. So if you wanted to take a deeper look into some of these slides, we'll also get you that as well. Cool. So on the topic of subject lines, let's also bring up tokens. So tokens are personalization fields that you can use. So like, for example, if you've ever gotten an email that says, "Hi, Ani, I see that you work at Gem." The word Ani and Gem are personalized tokens that you can use. And so we recommend using tokens in subject lines because it can actually improve your open rates by about 5% in absolute terms. And what token you want to use kind of depends a little bit about your organization. Some of the trends that we've noticed is that larger companies will include the company name. And this makes sense because if you're a bigger brand, you're probably more recognizable and you're likely to capture a candidate's attention. And then smaller companies, they typically use job title because if you're a smaller company, you might be able to attract a candidate with a more impressive sounding role than, say, a larger company. So just a couple of tips and tricks there. And then Jer, I see you laughing about mail merge fields. Yeah, that's a very technical term. I would not, that's not my forte or my way of speaking. Cool. So let's talk about how long your subject line should be, because this is also really important. I don't know if you've ever gotten an email that has a super long subject line that you can't even read. Those are really annoying. And our data basically confirms the same element. Typically, shorter is generally better. And the sweet spot appears to be around the 3 to 9 words, though sometimes a subject line as long as 11 could be good, but it has to be catchy. And then again, some best practices as you're building out your subject line. These are from some of our customers who have built some really impressive outreach that converts. And so again, a lot of the suggestions you see here are similar to what we mentioned earlier, like appealing to curiosity, mentioning mutual connections. These are some of the proven copyright tactics that we've seen that our customers have implemented with pretty good success. Being verb forward is also another favorite of mine. As a product marketer, I'm a huge copyright nerd, and I typically like to be verb forward in all of my copy and documents. So that one really resonates with me. And then the last one, the infuse your language with personality. Again, like, sounding jargony or corporate-y never really works, especially with candidates, especially if they're top tier candidates. So you want to, make it sound human and personal. Cool. So let's go into SOBO. So if you're not a Gem customer, this might be a new term for you. SOBO means send on behalf of. This is essentially where you send an email on behalf of someone else in the company, often a hiring manager or executive. This is a really cool tactic, and it's shown to work really well because what it does is it adds more credibility and authority of the person, of who the email is from. So it's really effective if you can get a candidate to see an email come from a senior leader, because then they might be like, oh, wow, this person's interested. A personal story for me, for example, when Gem tried to recruit me, I first got an email from a recruiter. I didn't open it. The second email came from the hiring manager, who was the chief operating officer at Gem. And I'm not going to lie, it got me because I was like, wow, the chief operating officer wants to talk to me. That's impressive. So again, just another example of how you can kind of get a candidate to just at least open that first email and start a conversation. And then Elaine, I see that you wanted to see the length slide again. We'll cover it again in the Q&A if we have time. And again, if not possible, we'll share the recording out with you after the session so that you can go deeper into that slide again. Cool. So let's talk about SOBO in a little bit more detail. So I mentioned SOBO is really effective, but what we've seen is that typically you want it to happen after the first email. So either the second or third email is the one that you want to send from the hiring manager or executive. And what this does after talking to some candidates and recruiters is that basically it paints this narrative in a candidate's head that the recruiter is so excited about you that they personally brought your name up to leadership. And so that's going to be more compelling. And what's more is that a candidate is more likely to respond when they know that there's more than just one person, especially someone at a high level role, that is interested in talking to them. So as you can see here, the open rates and reply rates are much higher when you use SOBO compared to just sending it on behalf of a recruiter, especially after stage 1, 2, and 3. Cool. And then just as a further validation, here's an example of one of our customers who uses SOBO and has found great success. Again, they talk about using SOBO, especially for leadership hires, which again could make sense. If you're hiring a chief marketing officer, you probably want an email coming from the chief sales officer to show that they're really excited about partnering together. But this also works really well for non-leadership positions as well. Again, because it kind of brings in that credibility of like, oh, wow, someone really important in the company thinks that could be a good fit. Cool. So let's talk about what you actually write in an email. This is probably one of the most painstaking parts. So let's say you got a great compelling subject line, you got them to open. The next step is like, what do you actually say in the email that would convince them to say yes or take a call, right? And that's what we'll cover in this section. So let's just first talk about message length, because this one's really, really fascinating. What we found is that most of our customers typically have an email around 170 to 210 words for that initial message. What we actually recommend for just at a high level is actually keeping it within the 100 to 150 word count range. Again, the shorter, the better. Compelling message here typically works. And this is actually confirmed with LinkedIn as well, where they've shown best practices for InMail, where they say the response rates for shorter InMails, like 400 characters or less, achieves a 22% higher than average response rate for all InMails. Cool. And then in terms of response rates, slightly longer messages will work better typically for SMBs, so smaller businesses. Again, if you're a smaller company, maybe your brand is not as big, that's an opportunity for you to explain the opportunity in more detail, especially if it's a higher level role. Whereas if you're a larger enterprise company, people know your brand, a shorter message tends to work well. And then a mid-sized company typically reflects the overall trend, which is like around 100 to 150. Although we did notice sometimes that 450 to 500 words, if it's a long email, but it's really compelling, could also be really effective as well. And then Debbie, I see a question about what do the latest metrics say about the influence of AI? That's a great question. So we can go into that in more detail in Q&A, as I actually have a little bit of points there. But AI can actually be really helpful if you use it to personalize the message, because if you use AI to write a compelling message using the best practices that we shared here, the AI can actually write a pretty good first draft on that. And so in customers who use GemAI, for example, they'll prompt the AI to say, make it sound personal, talk about the opportunity we have. Also, please refer to unique characteristics of a candidate's profile. And so some of our top performing customers, when they're using GemAI to write their sequences, they're seeing about a 30 to 40% increase in reply rates versus manually writing it. So can definitely go into a little bit more detail there, but yeah, AI can definitely help you write a really good message, but of course, a good first draft. Right on. So now that we've kind of talked in high level about some of the core best practices and message length, I figured it'd be helpful to dive right into some examples of really good email outreach that we've seen from some of our customers. Again, the goal here is to just give you some inspiration and a jumping off point, but feel free to, take these and make your own edits and wording to sound more like your voice and what's relevant for your candidates. Cool. So this first one, focuses on explaining why a recruiter might be reaching out. It's just another way of making it more personalized. So this doesn't just mean mentioning mutual interests, but showing that you've done the research, what projects that they've worked on, um, and what they're doing at their current company. Their interests and skill sets. You have a strong position on like what they could bring to the new company, and then essentially it's really good flattering, right? Make them look. It helps you look trustworthy if you've done the research, but it also helps if you can also you know appeal to their values and show them that opportunity. Another one is about opportunities. One kind of saying that we have is that positions are static, but opportunities are dynamic. And what we mean is that, like, for a candidate, the next job title might be interesting, but what matters more is what lies in the future as ahead. And so the mantra we say is upward trajectories, not lateral transfers. That's the kind of value proposition you want to compel to your candidate there. And that's what this email does here. So they talk about what opportunities they have at the company. It could be something like building a team from scratch, having more impact, maybe the opportunity to learn a new skill set and make them more attractive in the market. Whatever it is, that's a nice way of just highlighting the next level of like not just the title, but a really cool opportunity that would convince someone to take the plunge. And then the other one is social proof. Social proof is another big one. It works in sales and it works in recruiting as well. It just gives you, again, that additional layer of credibility that your organization is a good place to consider. So if you have public reviews, if you can link to your careers page where it talks about your culture, or if you have another landing page where there's employee quotes that are featured, there again, you can just emphasize the employee sentiment in the email itself and not just like hope that the candidate trusts you when you say that your company is a great place to work. So social proof is always a huge, huge value add. Cool. So I know we breezed through a lot of these data points and happy to go back later. One thing I just wanted to stress is that all of these best practices that I just shared, this is based on aggregated data for a lot of our customers. But at the end of the day, what's going to work best for you is for you to figure out, well, what does the data say for my organization? So if you can, reviewing analytics such as open rates, reply rates, interested rates, click-through rates, understanding who entered the process. If you're able to break up all of your sequences and then see like how that impacted the rest of the funnel, that's going to tell you the most compelling piece of what works for you in recruiting email outreach. But again, some of these benchmarks might be able to help you get started with some of the right steps. Cool. So before I head into the Q&A section, I know that there's a lot of customer folks here who are familiar with GEM and some of you who aren't. So I just wanted to share a little bit more about how GEM helps customers with these capabilities. So if you are eager to find a solution that can help you with some of this automation and personalization, figured I'd just share a little bit before we go into Q&A. So the first one is GEM has AI-powered sourcing that allows you to scour data candidates from over 600 million profiles. And so the way it works is you can use natural language inputs, you can use hard filters and specific criteria for your job requisition, and you simply input that into the AI, and then GEM will scour multiple databases and find you the best candidates that meet your criteria. And then from there, you can go ahead and source them right in GEM. So just taking that a step deeper, when you input those candidates and you find one that meets your criteria or you want to learn more, once you click into that candidate, you're going to get a lot of information about that candidate itself. So you're going to be able to see, are they already in your CRM? Have you emailed them in the past? Have they applied? Because we have those deep integrations with your ATS, we can pull all of this information from your email, from LinkedIn, and your applicant tracking system to give you that full contextual view of every candidate that we surface. But we can also bring you net new candidates that you've never spoken to as well. And then on the right side, just being really mindful with AI, we also want to make sure that you see exactly why this candidate was a good fit. So when you're using AI sourcing and you find some candidates and you want to understand why they were picked, you can get a quick match score summary that highlights exactly why GEM AI thought this was a good candidate and where their strengths lie. And then I know we had this conversation earlier in the chat. but then you can, from there, immediately source and sequence those candidates, right? So you can use AI or you can manually write your emails, but essentially you're going to be able to um, build up a multi-stage sequence that you can schedule so that you can reach out to those candidates that you think are a good fit. And again, this is where you can use Sobo. You can schedule sequences to go out at the right time based on the day or the hour that works the best. Um, and all of this, again, happens in Gem. So you find the candidates, you set up a sequence, and you send it and set it and forget it. And so if a candidate doesn't reply to that first email, they'll get the second one, third one, however many until you tell it to stop or if a candidate replies. And then that's just a small part of what Gem offers. This slide here just shows our entire platform. It's pretty comprehensive, as you can see on the diagram. We offer a range of products to support the entire process. But what's great here is you can just choose the products you want, so you're not forced into an all or nothing commitment. But in summary, we bring together your sourcing, your CRM, your ATS, your scheduling, and talent marketing, so you can handle all that recruiting in one place. And with all these products in one platform, you're going to be able to get that Talent 360 profile that you see in the middle. So that's going to be your single source of truth for every relationship. So you know everything about the candidate, like past interactions, applications, and more. And then you're also going to see all of your data in Gem and be able to pull metrics across the funnel because there's fewer data discrepancies when you have everything in one system. And then the last added bonus is that the AI that Gem uses is also going to be much better because it has that complete data set to work on. So the AI is going to know which candidates have applied before, who you've spoken to, and so on. So in summary, our products are fully integrated and they work better together. And that's why we have a 4.8 out of 5 rating on G2, which again is all publicly available for y'all. Cool. So I know we got a lot of questions in the chat. So let me go ahead and stop sharing for a sec and we can go right in. So I'll start at the very top. Oh, we got a lot. All right, cool. So let's see. So we did talk about what the metrics say about the influence of AI. So yeah, I just want to go again deeper into that. So we have customers who use AI to write their sequences. Again, best practices typically you want the AI to write that first draft of the sequence and then review it later. But what our internal benchmark shows that customers who are using AI to write that first sequence, they're able to see a higher response rate because the AI can automatically pull in like unique profile characteristics of a candidate and speak to that. And so that's an area where AI can just like take the step that a recruiter might naturally do, but do it at scale, right? So it's all the best practices that we talked about today and just automating a little bit of it. Cool. And then let's see. Do I notice differences in recruiting, for example, in the US and EU countries? That's a really good question. So the data here that we see is mostly North America and English-speaking Europe. So that's a really good point to bring up for next year's report that we can look into, is just to break it up by US and EU. But at the top of my head, I don't have any specific nuances to call out between the US and EU. Cool. And then Liz, I think you make a good point, and those are trade-offs with sending on messages on the weekend. It could also come across as that you're working on the weekend, which isn't the right thing to do, or if they don't, if you send it on the weekend, they might not respond till Monday. Totally fair. Again, just when we see this data, obviously for that reason there, like we don't see as many sends, but we see enough sends that the data you saw where the reply rates are still pretty high, those are all statistically significant. So again, it's really worth testing out for you, for your organization, and you know where it makes sense for you. Is there a difference in prime days, of the week when the week contains a holiday? Ooh, that's a really good question. You know, we haven't looked into that specifically, but that's a great question, and I will take that as a note, see if we have that in our data, and if not, at least include it in our next report. And then, are the reply response rates different for LinkedIn versus email? Good question. So the benchmarks data that you saw here today is all based on email. I'm not sure if LinkedIn publicly makes their in-mail data available, but what I do know is that LinkedIn has traditionally said something along the lines of keeping your in-mail messages around 400 characters or less. Cool. And ask to go to the subject line. We can do that in a sec. And let's see. Oh yeah, and Eric, sounds like you said a message that is long, but with interesting response rates can actually get a higher reply rate. Yep, exactly. So definitely worth testing. Cool. How important is the graphics aspect? I'm sorry, sir. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that question, but if you can clarify more, I'm happy to try to answer that. How accurate is email information sourcing tool? That's a great question, Jason. So one of the things that people like about Gem is the reliability of our email findings. So it's something that you can easily trial and see for yourself. But typically, one of the things that our customers love the most is the fact that we can reliably find good emails for passive talent. And then, do you ever tie persona data of the target audience? Marvin, that's a great question. We haven't included it in this report, but that is a good call out for next year's report of doing department level specific email outreach. For the purpose of this report, we just wanted to give a general bird's eye view of the data, but that's definitely true. I think you can definitely make an argument that technical roles will have a much different email outreach conversion rate than, say, a sales or marketing role. And then Thomas, you mentioned, do you recommend using different times for the follow-up? For example, first stage at 4 p.m., second stage at 8 a.m. Great question. So I didn't cover it in this presentation, but we actually have a page in our email outreach report, which I think you can download from this portal. It actually has a page that shows if you send your first email on X date, when is the next best time to send your second email? So just in general practices, I believe our report says that you want to space out your email messages between 1 and 2 to like 3 to 4 days. And then between 2 and 3, it's like around 5 to 6 days. Okay. And Danielle mentioned you can get the data from LinkedIn if you have a recruiter level seat. Oh, okay. Good to know. Yeah. Maybe we can try that. And then Courtney, I can reach out to our ops person and make sure that the deck can also be sent with the recording. Shouldn't be a problem. Cool. And then is there any data regarding email and in-mail response? Yeah, Sheila, fortunately, we don't have in-mail reply rates or conversions in this report. This was all email data, but it sounds like, according to Danielle, that there is in-mail response rates. Oh, good question, Jen. Don't quote me on it exactly. It is in our actual full report, but I believe spacing out messages 1 and 2 by like somewhere around 3 to 4 days was the answer, and then 2 and 3 by like 5 to 6 days. But I believe our report has the full details in there. Cool. And then someone also mentioned sending a one-pager, sure thing. And then someone asked, how do we compare to Hire Easy? Great question. It's we have similar functionality where we have an AI sourcing tool. We also have sequences. Can definitely have a conversation with someone at Gem if you want to know more. But in general, one of the areas where we're stronger in is having the stronger CRM capabilities where you can organize your candidates. We also have end-to-end analytics across the entire hiring process. So like you can pull data from your CRM and ATS. And also, most importantly, we have an applicant tracking system. So you can have your sourcing, your CRM, and your ATS all in one place. And then is there a way to see how my emails perform based on send times within the platform? Yeah, you should be able to do that. So when you set up a sequence, you will set it up in a way it's like when the emails go out. So when you look at your sequences, you'll know this sequence is the one that we send out at 8 a.m. Another sequence is at 6 a.m. And so you can compare the open and response rates by different sequences, if that makes sense. How often would you recommend we do sequence testing? Once a month, once a quarter? Great question. Not to give you a cop out, but it kind of depends. It really depends on how many emails you're sending. So you want to have a large end size. So if you're sending hundreds of emails a month, then a monthly cadence probably makes sense because you'll have enough data to actually like make an inference. If you're only sending like 1 to 2 emails a week, then a monthly cadence might not be enough because you just won't have a large enough data size. Cool. I think I went through all the questions, but keep me honest here, panel, if there's anything else. And if not, again, if you're interested in seeing how Gem can help you automate a lot of these things and set up these best practices within your recruiting platform, I would just say, like, again, you can go ahead and click request personalized demo in the portal here, or just send a note to contact@salesgem.com. But yeah, I think this has been really helpful. Thank you all. I'll stay here for a few more questions as they come up. But in the meantime, I hope you all have a lovely day. And then Andrew, you asked, how will I know if Gem integrates with my ATS? Great question. So Gem integrates with all the major popular ATSs out there: Greenhouse, Workday, SuccessFactors, Lever. There's a whole page on our website. So if you want to share which one, which is your ATS, I can tell you right now. But we have a gem.com/product/integrations. It's on our homepage. And we have a number of integrations with popular ATSs as well as our own. I'm sorry to hear that, Andrew. Dayforce. Unfortunately, we do not have an integration with Dayforce. We do have an integration with Ashby, so if you wanted to source candidates, you can then immediately push them into the Ashby ATS. Cool. I'll stay on for a few more seconds if there's any other questions. And Andrew, if you want to try your luck and tell me what your ATS is, you're happy to do so. Eddie. Oh, I've never heard of Eddie. So I don't think we have an integration with Eddie, but that's an interesting one. I'll have to look at that. While I'm here, I can go ahead and pull in some of the information. Let's see. And thank you all for the kind words. Appreciate it. If you have any feedback, please go ahead and leave it in the chat. I would love to hear it. We do not have an integration with JobAdder as well, unfortunately. Interesting. Bamboo HR. So I know we have an HRIS integration with Bamboo HR if you use Gem ATS, but I do not think we have an integration with the Bamboo HR ATS itself. But with the HR system, we do. We do have an integration with Bullhorn. Again, same concept. You can source your candidates in Gem, have them in your CRM, and then immediately push them into your ATS as an applicant if you choose to use your Bullhorn ATS instead of Gem. All right, I think everyone's done with the questions. So if that's the case, I will end it here. If any of you are still on, thank you so much for your patience and walking through the data with me. I hope you found this interesting. Take care, y'all.